Hello, New Mexico, and welcome to another episode of Around the Roundhouse, a podcast featuring the policies, politics, and personalities of the land of enchantment from the Roundhouse and beyond. My name is Daniel Chacón, and I'm the state government reporter for the Santa Fe, New Mexican. As usual, we had an interesting mix of stories this week, but the big news came out of Los Angeles, where President Donald Trump's, or where protests over President Donald Trump's immigration raids led to violent clashes with law enforcement and prompted the president to call out the military. Although the action was in California, New Mexico became part of the news when Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham joined other Democratic governors in issuing a statement criticizing Trump's decision to deploy the National Guard to LA. In a statement, all the governors agreed that governors are their commanders-in-chief of their National Guard. They called any decision to activate the Guard without working with that state's governor ineffective and dangerous. Protests against Trump and his administration are expected to continue Saturday, including right here in New Mexico, as part of a nationwide demonstration that has been dubbed No King's Day. Our guest this week is Dr. Heidi Li Feldman, a professor emeritus from Georgetown and an active member of an organization called Indivisible Santa Fe, whose parent organization is part of a coalition behind No King's Day. Thank you, Heidi, for joining us today. It's really nice to meet you.
It's very nice to meet you, Daniel.
I may call you Dr. Feldman because I'm just so used to it. I want to offer you that respect.
You want to be courteous. And I answer to Dr. Feldman, Heidi, Professor, all good.
Fantastic. Well, I gave a little bit of a Cliff Notes version of your bio in the introduction, but will you please tell us a little bit more about yourself and your professional background?
So I think the most relevant for our conversation today is that I am a philosopher, a trained philosopher, and a JD, a lawyer. I taught in the classroom for over 30 years, law, and I've been a political activist for a long time, organizing events and protests in Washington, D.C., Denver, Colorado, starting and now here, helping to, since the early 2000s.
And what brought you to New Mexico, and have you enjoyed living here?
So I'm a very New Mexican. I got here about a year ago with my husband. We came here, as so many people do, on vacation and found ourselves coming back. And then we said, maybe we should check it out in all the seasons, because perhaps someday we'll want to live there. So we made a concerted effort to visit regularly. And when I decided not to teach anymore, I'm still doing my scholarship and other professional activities. But since I wasn't teaching, I didn't have to stay in Washington, D.C., where I'd lived for 30 years. And my husband's job was portable enough that we said, let's do it.
Right on. Well,
here we are.
Bienvenidos a Nuevo Mexico.
Muchas gracias.
Heidi, you mentioned your legal background, and I wanted to ask you from a legal perspective, what actions about Trump's are most concerning about Trump's second term in office, and how do you feel the courts have held up regarding those actions?
Well, as a segue into that, and picking up from your intro to our conversation today, you may have seen that now New Mexico's State Attorney General, Raul Torres, has joined 18 other I think they're all Democrats, 18 other state attorneys general in supporting California's lawsuit against the Trump administration for improper use of the National Guard. So one terribly concerning piece of the unlawful conduct that the Trump regime has been engaging in is flouting all the different other parts of our federal system. And by federal system, I don't just mean at the federal level, Trump is ignoring the rightful, constitutionally defined, and in some cases statutorily defined respect for states as well as for other branches of government. And many of the lawsuits that have been brought, regardless of whether they concern cutting agency funding or uh, the unlawful deportation of people to El Salvador, to prison in El Salvador, or the litigation again over his effort to keep certain uh, large law firms from doing business with the federal government. All of those lawsuits have in common this theme that Trump, like a lot of autocrats who are attempting to undo a constitution, is ignoring his constitutional role and encroaching on the other parts of government.
And have we seen the courts respond to those actions?
So this has been really fascinating to watch. I am so impressed with the federal district court judges. That's the first level of the federal judiciary. So it's the trial court judges.
Mhm.
Over and over, they have tried to prevent Trump from implementing measures that are unlawful, sometimes by granting temporary injunctions, which are emergency orders, sometimes by then making those permanent. And those courts have included judges from George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, Obama, Trump himself, Biden. There's been a tremendous amount of consistency,
Okay.
not unanimity, but consistency. The record as you go up in appeals is spottier, and the Supreme Court is a bit of a wild card.
Interesting times we're living in, correct?
Oh, very. I'd be happier if I were a little bored.
Well, I don't know that you'll be bored on Saturday, and so I wanted to ask you about about No King's Day. What is No King's Day, and how did it start?
Okay. So, No King's Day is a day of national action. There are going to be protests all over the country. Last I checked, late last night, there are more than 1,800 No King's protests scheduled all over the country, even including some in Mexico, a few in Canada, Puerto Rico, really all over North America, and parts of Central America. The protest is part of a series of public protests that are meant to push back against what is often called an autocratic surge. An autocratic surge is when somebody who is in a democracy, who has power, like Trump, tries to sort of take the culture and the society by storm. So by engaging in all sorts of anti-constitutional and unconstitutional activity, forcing large institutions to capitulate to him if at all possible, and trying to put on massive shows of force. This is to create an aura of invincibility for the aspiring dictator. What protests do, and particularly one that is called No Kings, a title I'll return to in a second, is they interrupt that narrative. They're not an end in themselves, but the way that they help all the other efforts, whether it's in court, whether it's other activities outside of courts and off the streets, the way that helps push back against the efforts of a would-be dictator is by making people realize they are not helpless, that the dictatorship is not preordained. In the United States, power comes from the people. And when the people turn out, that's a show.
Well, I was going to ask you, do you think that Trump will care and change his ways as a result of these demonstrations?
I don't think necessarily Trump will care, and I can say more about that. But I think that many ordinary Americans will care a great deal because I think there are a lot of people, regardless of what party they're registered with, who are afraid and scared and maybe even disgusted by Trump's actions in LA, and across the country with his mass deportation programs, or with his unlawful slashes to the National Park Service and the National Forest Service, to medical research. Uh, I mean, there's a myriad of issues that I think people are very concerned about, and but the violence that Donald Trump is now wreaking on the U.S. streets, on the streets of LA and elsewhere, is frightening to people. When they see that their neighbors and friends and people who share their city or their county are turning out, that gives people the confidence to resist.
Yeah.
And that puts pressure on their representatives, state, local, and federal, other than the president, to fight back.
Okay.
And I think that many of those elected officials are capable of being influenced by the people.
Heidi, how many events are planned in New Mexico, and exactly what will be happening Saturday here in Santa Fe?
Okay, so I don't have offhand a fully accurate count. Anyone can go to nokings.org. That's the umbrella website, and there's a map there. When I looked yesterday, there's events in Albuquerque, there's events in Las Cruces. I think that there are events north of us, maybe in Española, maybe in Taos. I'm just trying to visualize where I saw the purple dots.
But obviously, go check it out for themselves.
Yes, but I mean, what I was amazed by in the past week is how many New Mexico events have sprung up. The national organizers of Indivisible National have said that there's nowhere in the country where people have to drive more than 30 minutes to get to a protest.
Okay.
Here in Santa Fe, we will be gathering at the Roundhouse at 10 a.m. Actually, music will be starting at 9:30, but more formal events will begin at around 10 a.m. There's going to be open mic. There are going to be not too much open mic, so you don't have to worry about windy speeches. There will be music. There will be some performances. And then at 10:45, there is a two-route march planned. One group of people headed towards the plaza, another people circling the roads around the Roundhouse, around the Capitol grounds, to exercise in a lawful and peaceful way our First Amendment rights with a sidewalk march. And that will then the events will resume back at the Roundhouse.
Okay. Heidi, you touched on this a little while ago, but why is it called No King's Day? Are progressives saying that President Trump is a drama queen?
Then it would have been good if we had called it No Queens.
It is Pride Month after all.
Exactly. I didn't name the march, but I'll tell you what's behind the name, and I'll tell you what I think is important about the name. So we are part of a national coalition, and we're Indivisible Santa Fe website, indivisiblesantafe.org, is part of the national group, or we're aligned with the national organization Indivisible. We have co-sponsors for the march, ranging from 50501 to the Democratic Party of Santa Fe County, Human Rights Alliance. There's a whole list. Again, you can see the whole list on the website at indivisiblesantafe.org. That we've come together both in Santa Fe and some of these groups who have presences elsewhere across the nation to say we are proud of the heritage of a country that was founded to reject one person dictatorial rule. That's what the American colonists were resisting. And in their day and age, that was what a king was.
Okay.
A king had absolute prerogatives. Our country was explicitly founded to reject that. And so the No Kings title is meant to be a nod to our history and an admonition to the current president. I would just like to add that the date was chosen for two reasons. One, it's Flag Day, and
Yes.
we are proud of our flag, and we are proud that it stands for No Kings. Second, Trump has decided to throw himself a multi-million-dollar, I believe the estimates are around $45 million military parade in the streets of Washington, D.C. on Saturday. Technically, he says it's to celebrate the 250th founding of the U.S. military, which is itself shocking, that he thinks that that's what we should have a big parade for. Not that there's anything wrong with the U.S. military, but we're not a military dictatorship. But it also happens to be his birthday. And as I mentioned, Flag Day. Most people think he chose the date because it's his birthday.
Well,
because he's a drama queen.
If you could wish for anything on Trump's birthday, what would it be?
That even though we now expect thousands and thousands of people across the country to engage in counter demonstrations, that it turns out to be millions of people across the country.
You mentioned the military parade. Are you all saying that Trump is throwing himself a taxpayer-funded party to feed his ego?
Well, I think you just said that, and I'm happy to agree with it. I think that what we're saying, I mean, yes, to your question, but even more menacingly, Trump is taking a leaf from the playbook of other autocrats who have tried to bring down constitutional democracy in their country or to prevent it from getting a toehold. So he has expressed admiration for the North Korean rulers' military parades for which are thrown in his honor. He's trying to do likewise. He wants not just to sort of, I think, promote his ego, but as I said before, to send a message of dictatorial strength, that he has it and that he's entitled to it.
And I don't recall if we spoke about this, but these protests were planned even before what was happening in LA, correct?
Yes, they were, because, and that goes back to what you asked me at the top of this conversation when you said, what's going on in the courts? What do I think? Do I think the courts are resisting Trump's efforts to act unlawfully? It's been obvious, frankly, since before his election with Project 2025, but certainly since his inauguration, that he wants to exercise virtually absolute power. Now, he can do that sometimes using the forces of DHS or ICE. He can do it by activating the Marines. He can do it, in ways that involve the threat of physical violence. But he can also do this, as he has from day one, by simply ignoring the law and doing as he pleases. One of the things, I'll just to illustrate this, I've had to explain to people, this is the law professor in me, that Trump's executive orders do not have the force of law. So why is he constantly issuing executive orders? To make it seem like he can. These orders they're essentially like memos to other parts of the executive branch saying what he wants them to do. But just because he wants them to do those things doesn't make them lawful.
Like I said, interesting times we're living in. And Heidi, I wanted to turn back to the protests that are going to be happening on Saturday. As you mentioned, there's over 1,800 that are scheduled to take place. And I know that a core principle behind all No Kings events is a commitment to nonviolent action. But are there concerns that the demonstrations will attract provocateurs and lead to violence?
Well, I don't think so. First of all, here in Santa Fe, I don't think we are particularly on edge about that.
Okay.
I do think that across the country and here in Santa Fe, people are prudently advising attendees about measures to take if there are provocateurs, not to engage, walk away. Um, we have here in Santa Fe, we have trained peacekeepers who will be moving amongst the crowd. They will try to intervene if there's a problem. We have rapport with, we have a contact, a liaison with the police. We don't expect the police presence, but if there were an emergency, we have a way to reach law enforcement. But we don't want this to be a policed event because it's a peaceful event and it's a lawful event. I would also say that we've been very carefully explaining to people how to use the sidewalks for their own personal safety and in obedience to the law so that they don't create snarls of people, clog the sidewalks, and invite hostility.
Because as part of this, the organization behind these events, there are trainings that folks can be able to can participate in, and they can get more information about that on that website, correct?
Yes, and the best resource for folks in and around Santa Fe is, and I'm sorry to say it again, indivisiblesantafe.org, where we have all the resources, links to all the trainings, and all the information.
Okay. Heidi, you have been so generous with your time, and it's been really nice to speak with you. Am I missing to ask you anything that you'd like, or missing to ask you anything or anything that you'd like to add about No King's Day?
It couldn't be more important to stand up now. This is not just, Trump is not engaging in just political stunts or trying to get TV time. And we shouldn't be either. We should be out there fighting for what the US ought to stand for, and I think truly does stand for.
All right. Well, Heidi, thank you so much again for joining us. And thank you to our viewers and our listeners for joining us this week. And thank you for listening to Around the Roundhouse. Join us every week as we talk to newsmakers in the political realm by subscribing to our podcast through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. For the latest developments in New Mexico, follow our coverage online at santafenewmexican.com, where you can also subscribe to our political news letter, The Roundhouse Report. Until next time, I'm Daniel Chacón, and this has been Around the Roundhouse.